Chapter 1. The world swam into sharp focus. I was strapped into a metal seat, bolted to a metal bulkhead that was shaking violently. The room was covered in dirt and grime, and there were 7 other scared-looking people strapped into similar seats, 2 on my side and 4 on the opposite wall. A bored voice droned over the anachronistic intercom system.
Welcome, indentured. You are currently aboard the shuttle Niera, soon to dock with the transport Autolycus. Please remain strapped in. You will be assigned your work detail and duties for the next 6 years once we reach the Autolycus. Do not attempt to escape, as we are currently cruising into orbit around Homestar 5, and will be docking in 30 minutes. Please take this time to familiarise yourself with your new characters.
You have to spend money to make money. Some advice I once received from a good friend of mine. A piece of advice from me? Always do your own research when it comes to other people's advice. Ignoring this obvious paradox, let me introduce myself. I am James Owen, an impoverished research assistant in a deadbeat university that has no funding and no future. The major financial collapse in the previous decade had all but halted scientific research. The world economy had been in freefall up until the release of Homestar and its rapid adoption by most of the world. Homestar was a sci-fi orientated virtual reality MMO that offered leveling, questing, resource gathering, spaceship construction, world exploration, alliances, wars, and much, much more. Due to the sandbox design of the game, much of the actual fleshing out of what was possible was done by the players. The developers built and maintained the core game mechanics, but beyond that it was up to the players to decide what to do with them. From these mechanics, a new world evolved. Set far in the future, with spacecraft, faster-than-light travel, lasers, and many other gadgets invented by the players, Homestar provided humanity the chance to live out their futuristic desires in the virtual world. No need to go developing pesky rockets or inventing teleportation. You could do this in the game. There was simply no money to develop new technologies in the real world. The game was so immersive and malleable that the world's scientific minds flocked to the game to develop its own complex mechanics and budding new economy. The movement of the best and brightest to this new virtual reality ensured that mass uptake of the game was all but definite. Expensive, long-term immersion rigs were developed, allowing people to forget the real world and live in-game. 15 years after its release, Homestar had become a second world on top of the real one, a layer on top of reality that only the players could see, touch, and smell. Most business transactions and job interviews, in fact, a large number of jobs, were done inside the game. People stopped caring about non-game related technological developments and instead ploughed their hard-earned cash into the development of in-game technologies, buildings, and vehicles. In-game money was originally worth very little, but as the popularity of the game grew and cryptographic money moved into global adoption, the in-game credits rapidly grew in value. Soon, Homestar credits became recognised as an international currency in their own right. So, where do I fit into all of this? Well, as I said, my name is James, and it was the above quote that landed me in more trouble than I could possibly handle. Up until recently, I'd never spent much money in-game. I'd never bought anything for over 1,000 credits, as I was saving up to fulfill a dream of owning a small fighter plane. I wasn't a serious player, so it was a sizable investment for a likely small return. The reason I wanted the ship was because I had chosen the pilot class when creating my character, and had hopes of becoming a badass of the skies. I'd watched Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica and several other sci-fi shows, and wanted a piece of that world for myself. Badger had been badgering me for months about how embarrassing it was to hang out with such a noob who didn't even have his own ship. After his fateful piece of advice, "You have to spend money to make money," I finally cracked, got a loan from a local shark, and bought a small 2-seater fighter. It was fine. They had the ship as collateral, and if I found I couldn't pay the debt, then I could just sell them the ship and be done with it. Badger and I had agreed to meet that night for a quest I had picked up a few days ago. I rocked up in my new ship, drifting perfectly into a parking space next to Badger. He stood there with a suitably impressed look on his face as I popped open the canopy and looked down at him. "How can you afford this, man? This is epic," he finally managed to stutter. I called in a few favours, scraped the piggy bank, and got a loan from Ravens. "Ravens, eh? You better make sure you pay them back. People who don't get put in full immersion capsules and used as cargo hauler crew for the rest of the term of their debt. No option for early release." Cargo hauling was big business in Homestar. With half the world's population online at any one time, the buying, selling, and transport of ship, weapon, and armour building materials was a vital economy. Homestar did have FTL travel and communication, but didn't have teleportation. Therefore, any materials gathered had to be transported from the site they were mined to the refineries, and from the refineries to the construction sites and marketplaces. Are we going to do this quest or not? I gave Badger my most withering look and invited him to a group. The quest involved the disruption of some local pirates, a small group, and the reclamation of some lost cargo. A standard recapturing of goods quest. My ship wasn't fitted with an FTL drive, so Badger and I made the long trip to the location specified by the quest. We found the location empty, but for a small, apparently abandoned facility stuck to the outside of a slowly rotating asteroid. We cautiously approached the asteroid and docked to the landing pad. Badger climbed timidly down the ladder from the cockpit, looking around as he went. "There's no one here, man." The quest said there would be a small group of low-level pirates here, with the stolen cargo. It was at that precise moment that I saw the flash of the arriving ships. 5 heavy armoured fighter planes with orange-tipped wings dove towards the platform. I just began to climb down the ladder, but could hear the beep of the missile lock and see the plume of smoke billowing from behind the projectiles that headed towards our position. "Run!" I yelled, hoping to alert Badger to move out of the explosion radius of the missiles, but he was already nearly inside the asteroid facility. I had just placed my foot on the landing pad when the missiles hit with a deafening boom. The explosion from the missiles blasted me forwards away from the ship, and I collided with the wall of the asteroid facility. My measly 10,000 hit points sank to 0, and I was treated to a quick and painful respawn. The Raven loan sharks have been informed of the destruction of your ship. You are still liable for full payment of the loan and will be expecting your first installment of 8,000 credits in the next week. This was the message that greeted me as my screen flickered back into colour in the respawn station orbiting a local binary star. All respawn stations were found in binary systems as it made them easy to locate. "I'm ruined," was my first thought. 8,000 credits a week was the cost of the loan I had taken out, but I had assumed on the extra income generated by having the new fighter to transport goods and complete quests. The next message made my stomach drop as if someone had just created a neutron star in my boots. The skill Tomb Raider was used on your corpse, and 50,000 credits have been removed from your inventory. What? Tomb Raider was a skill that could be used on any player, unless sufficient preventative measures were taken. The skill was used in combination with a tailor-made trap called a tomb force field. The force field generator had to have the name of the player programmed into its matrix before it was used, meaning that someone, who knew who I was and that I was going to be at that exact location, had thrown this force field around me seconds before I'd hit the wall of the asteroid facility. 50,000 credits was most of the remainder of the savings I had kept to help pay the loan if my income suffered an unforeseen dip. I'd only had it on me because I had come straight from the shipyard after buying my new fighter plane. The Tomb Raider skill was usually useless, as most players didn't carry large sums of money on their person, and so was only useful if you happened to know that a particular player was carrying a valuable item or large number of credits. And so, I was broke. The ship was gone, and the savings I was hoping to use to help pay the loan installments was stolen from me. I furiously tried to gather resources and materials to sell to make enough money to pay the first installment, but had to default on more than half. The next week was worse, and after failing to get in contact with Badger for 2 weeks, I was losing hope. The third week started with a letter through my door from the Raven loan sharks telling me that I had 1 week left to catch up on my payments, or they would have to collect through other methods. I was getting desperate, but I knew that Badger had over 200,000 saved for a rainy day. If I could just get hold of him, then all would be fine. I could borrow the money off him and pay off the last 3 weeks of installments. We could use his ship to do some ore running and collect a few quests, and everything would be fine. When Badger still didn't return any of my calls or reply to any of my messages over the next few weeks, I truly began to worry. What was keeping him so busy? Why isn't he responding to me? I had wondered at the start if it was him who'd used the Tomb Raider skill, but knew that he was a gunner and didn't have access to that kind of tech. I also wondered if he was the one who sold me out, but he hadn't known the location of the pirate hideout until we'd met just before heading off. As Monday came round, my last hope was that I could somehow get the loan sharks to understand what had happened to me, and that if I could just get in touch with my friend, everything would be fine. I woke up on Monday morning, filled with self-assurance that, of course, they would understand. How could they not see that it wasn't my fault I couldn't pay? Anyway, I'd been set up. If anything, they were likely to offer to help me find the vagabonds that robbed me of 50,000 credits. I turned up at the loan sharks' offices in a suit and open collar. Didn't want to look too corporate. You never know. They may have a thing against that type. After explaining my situation to the secretary, I was asked to wait in an allocated room. The secretary had taken my ID and offered a locker for me to put my other belongings in. I sat there, waiting for what felt like hours, my assurance that everything was going to be okay slowly dropping away. Finally, just as I had decided that my loan obviously wasn't that big a deal to them and I may as well leave, a man knocked and entered the room. "Ah, Mr. Owen." I stood up. "James, please." "James, thank you for coming in today. Janet told me what happened to you. I am Mr. Antonovich. Don't worry, we'll get this sorted out in no time." My heart lifted at these words. They were going to help me. I don't know why I worried. It was all going to be fine. "If you would just follow me, James, we'll get started." I followed Mr. Antonovich through the door he had come through, along a corridor and through another set of double doors. The building was dirty and damp. It had old upholstery that looked as if it used to be a hotel. The room through the second set of doors was rather large and had 2 large green leather chairs placed slap bang in the middle. Mr. Antonovich indicated the chair on the right, and I sat. The quicker we get this sorted, the sooner I can get out of here. Mr. Antonovich sat in the chair opposite and ruffled some papers that I didn't realize he had been carrying. "We would like to thank you for coming in of your own volition, Mr. Owen. Most often we have to chase our debtors and bring them here by force." "No worries, just want to get this sorted." Mr. Antonovich began looking through the papers again and spoke without looking up. "I see you took out a loan 3 weeks ago for the sum of 1 million credits. You have failed to pay the installments for this loan for 3 consecutive weeks." At this point, I butted in and began to explain the situation to the man. "Yes, Janet informed me of your difficulties. Unfortunately, it is company policy that every loan must be repaid on time. Otherwise, the debtor is subject to a period of indentured work. I see that you had a 6-year repayment plan, Mr. Owen. Is that correct?" Now I was getting worried. I thought they were going to sort everything out. "Yes, a 6-year plan, but my good friend has the money to pay the weeks I've missed. If you just give me a bit more time to get hold of him." "Mr. Owen, I shall not waste your time and insult your intelligence, and will tell you that I hear this exact story from almost all of our overdue debtors. Just give me 1 more week and I'll have the money. My aunt on my mother's side will die soon, and I'll give the money to you then. If I trusted each of these stories, Ravens would go out of business in a week. I'm sure you understand." I did understand, but my story was different. It was true. I had been set up. "If you would follow me, please, Mr. Owen, and we can get you prepped for the immersion capsule." I sat there, in a daze. I had known that this is what Ravens did to people who failed to pay their weekly installments, but I'd never thought it would actually happen to me. I felt like running for it, but what was I supposed to do? Where would I go? Antonovich had just told me that they chase down people who don't come in voluntarily. Besides, I definitely remember the security on the door was packing some serious heat. "Mr. Owen." Mr. Antonovich had stood up and was indicating a set of doors on the opposite side of the room. I stood up and numbly walked through the set of doors. I hadn't prepared for this to happen. Would anyone miss me? How would I tell my boss? Would it even take them long to realize I hadn't turned up for days? The preparation for long-term immersion involved completely shaving my body, the introduction of many pipes into many orifices, and, finally, climbing into the long, white, cylindrical immersion capsule itself. How was it Mr. Antonovich had put it? Of my own volition. The door to the capsule closed, and I was plunged into complete blackness.